I'm Katherine Ellison, and today we're talking to Dr. Sarah Cheyette, who is a pediatric neurologist in San Francisco. And San Francisco Magazine has named Sarah top doc 5 years in a row. And so, what else can you tell us about yourself?
Oh, it's first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And I'm a pediatric neurologist, which means that I'm a doctor who deals with the brain. And the brain does all sorts of things. When things don't go wrong, we have headaches or seizures or developmental problems. But your brain is also where you think and pay attention. So that's something I take care of a lot.
That's cool. And so, basically, other doctors make referrals to you, right? As a specialist. So, are you seeing a lot of kids with ADHD? Do you see young kids, more boys than girls?
I see, I'm going to call them kids, but the kids may be in their 50s as well. So I see quite a spectrum of ADHD in both boys and girls, men and women, because this is something that no matter who you are, it could be affecting your life. Generally speaking, this may affect somewhere between 5 and 10% of both kids and adults, which is a huge number of people.
Sarah, in the years that you've been working, are you seeing more girls being diagnosed and sent to you?
Yes, when I started out in this business, which was the Stone Age, I think, you got diagnosed with ADHD if you were a really hyperactive little boy. And that was everybody's mental picture of what ADHD was. So that's who got diagnosed. As our mental concepts of ADHD do grow, we can see that it looks differently in different age groups and different genders. And the diagnosis and definition of ADHD has expanded. So, yes, we're seeing more girls now, more women as well.
Yeah, we've come a long way, but have we come all the way? Do you think there's still a lot of girls who are being overlooked?
Oh, most definitely, there are a lot of girls being overlooked. And I think when you look at the history of ADHD, it's very interesting. It's a disorder that's approximately been talked about for 100 years, a little bit more. In the early going, it was bad kids with bad parents. That's what ADHD was. And as we've come to appreciate the role of the brain and biology in determining behavior, we're seeing ADHD more as a brain disorder rather than a moral failure. And as the diagnosis has changed over the years, of course, it will change over the ensuing years as well. This is a work in progress.
In your experience, the people who come to you, do you think that our whole mission is about getting girls with ADHD diagnosed earlier? Are you seeing girls still being diagnosed at too late a time? Is that an issue?
Yes, most definitely. And I think part of the reason is that when there's a girl in elementary school, there's usually not that much homework that they have to deal with. And if they're not so fast at doing their homework because they're more inattentive, and more girls than boys are inattentive, it's not that big a deal. If it takes them an hour to do something that other kids would do in half an hour, nobody really notices or cares much. And when you're a little kid, also, maybe you're more likely to do your homework with your parents sitting there and saying, okay, next problem, or in aftercare where there's a whole group of people working together. I think there are reasons why we don't diagnose ADHD until middle or high school when it really makes a difference to be efficient in how you do your work.
So girls in middle school and high school might be more distressed by having ADHD, but is there a reason to diagnose them before that distress happens?
Yes, because dealing with the stress is the hardest part. It's easier to deal with ADHD before the stress sets in. And you can imagine that if you grow up as undertreated or untreated, unrecognized ADHD, you might be more likely to have more anxiety or depression. Like, why couldn't I do this? It seems to come easier to other people. You might develop a habit of having to check yourself over and over again to make sure you haven't lost things so you can have more kind of compulsive behaviors. And we do know that girls tend to be more perfectionists than boys. I would say that if a boy kind of procrastinates and procrastinates, he might be more likely not to finish the homework assignment, and the girl might be more likely to stay up till 3 a.m. if needed to get the homework assignment done. And then they hand it in, it looks good. Nobody knows that she had so much pain involved. But then she starts to associate work and going to school with all this pain, and she would develop defense mechanisms to prevent these things. Those are really hard to treat and deal with. They may be the most obvious thing that might bring the girl to attention. Like people will notice the anxiety or the depression or the obsessive compulsive disorder or the eating disorder or whatever else could be happening. But then it's the underlying ADHD that really needs to be treated.
I totally agree. And so, what's an ideal age for girls to be diagnosed?
Oh, it may be hard to come up with a exact number, but I think that it would be good to get an idea how your kid is managing, not how smart your kid is or how talented, but how your kid deals with things in the elementary school years. Now, that is a time where parents are most likely to step in and say, "Hey, I got this for you. I'll help you. I'll do this for
Yeah.
you." But
Uh-huh.
it might be particularly important to know that your kid can get out of bed and ready in the morning. It might be good to know that your kid will turn in their homework assignment without you putting it in their backpack for them.
You said before that it shows up in girls when they have trouble with their homework or schoolwork, but are there other ways that it shows up at an early age?
Girls tend to be inattentive, but they also could be hyperactive too. They could be blurting things out. They could be chatty Cathys, whatever society has been calling them.
Hands called me that, as a matter of fact.
No way. That's so funny. There are different ways that it can show up in terms of behavior, and people will use words to describe inattention that are socially acceptable, like dreamy. It's cute sometimes, right? And head in the clouds. That's just
Right.
her. There are these kind of ways that we describe things because let's face it, we don't want to be too much of a harsh grader on a little kid. And
Yeah.
there are room for differences, but just listen to the feedback you're getting. So if the teacher is telling you, hey, so and so is having problems, you may want to listen to that and not necessarily say you're not a good teacher or it's not a good match or your
Right.
classroom isn't set up right for my kid, whatever it is. You really see your kid outside of school more. So take some feedback, maybe year after year feedback, listen to that particularly.
Social problems too, because that's a
Right.
killer for girls, especially as they get into middle school, right?
It's so sad. Whether you're a girl who blurts things out and gets people mad at you, whether you're a girl who is inattentive and you miss social cues or the kind of nuances of relationships, it can really affect your life in a negative way and make you feel like there's something wrong with you. And that's hard to fix. That's hard to help you because you have this view that it's you that's the problem and it's an unfixable problem is what many girls feel, but it
Right.
is fixable. It's, I don't know if fix is the right word, but people
And
helped, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. With the depression and the anxiety that can come with ADHD, do you think that a lot of girls are getting misdiagnosed and so the ADHD isn't caught because you're treating the depression or the other things?
Oh, most definitely. I've seen that a lot in my practice where somebody comes to me because they're depressed or anxious and they've been on three different antidepressants and they feel like it's not doing anything. And then if we treat the ADHD, that can be the key to everything. And their depression, when you can't focus, it makes you depressed. When you're depressed, it can affect your ability to focus. So there's often this negative feedback cycle that is absolutely hard to know where to start to treat that. What do we do? And treating the ADHD is often quicker than treating anxiety and depression because of the way the medications work, if you're going to go down the medication route. So some people choose that. But oftentimes you want to go back and think about, let's think about that little child before the anxiety and depression set in. Who were you? And maybe there is something there to treat.
You've written 3 books about ADHD, and I'm really interested in your advice to parents about coaching as if they were an athletic coach, I think you say. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking. The first book that I wrote about ADHD, which is called ADHD and the Focused Mind, I actually wrote with my kids' karate coach
Oh,
and also my husband, who's a psychiatrist, but he gets thrown in there at the end. But it's the first ever and only book in history that was written by a combination of karate and psychiatry and neurology. And the thing is that when I would go to the karate classes and I would work out myself, the things that Pete was telling my kids to do were the same things that I would tell somebody with ADHD to do. You know,
interesting.
focus your eyes, right? Focus your eyes. You can't
Yeah.
hit the target. And there's so many kids and bigger issues like when you lose the match or when you lose the game, how do you regroup and move on? So the lessons that kids and adults learn through athletics are applicable to real life.
Yep.
And
Failure is a big
otherwise, it's just a bunch of people running around after a ball. If you don't take the lessons from that and apply them to your life, it doesn't have as much meaning.
for sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. What got you into learning about ADHD and specializing in it?
You will not believe this, but I started learning about ADHD because I would see people with headaches, and the headaches were terrible and frequent and constant. And as it turns out, one of the stressors that would lead people to have headaches was their ADHD,
Oh,
and couldn't fix the headaches any other way. And so I would work on treating their ADHD, and lo and behold, their headaches got better. Absolutely. And there's many reasons to treat ADHD, in other words, but that's how I started.
yeah, that's super interesting. What advice do you have for teachers who might have they're dealing with a big class, a big size class, and maybe there's one little girl in the back row who's dreamy. How can they support that girl?
Teachers have a big job, and my kids have had wonderful teachers by and large, and I have great respect for what teachers have to do. They have to take 30 different individuals and bring them from point A to point B during the school year. And what I would say is that everyone's point A is a little bit different, and everyone's journey from point A to point B is going to have their own unique path, right? And I think the best teachers have an understanding of those differences and a willingness to try to work with the kids as best as possible while still having to do all their classroom standard teaching and all those other things. But any flexibility that teachers can show and any leadership and if the teachers love what they're doing, that does help an ADHD concentrate.
Interesting. Yeah, because we're very sensitive to emotional content, I think.
I think so too, but like everyone, if you have a teacher who can make something come alive and interesting and fun, every kid in that room is going to concentrate better.
Yeah, for sure. But do you have any advice for teachers, things to look out for? Since teachers are on the front lines, they're seeing kids coping with their ADHD in ways that parents don't. Things that they should be looking for in particular.
So that girl who's staring out the window and who needs multiple cues. Oh, I'm knocking on my desk. That's the sound you're hearing. Who needs multiple cues to get things going and who might always seem like a little bit behind, although maybe is laughing about it to some degree. While there are other reasons for staring out the window too, like maybe the girl has stuff going on in her personal life. Let's keep an eye out for those girls. And even though there may be more pressing or obvious needs in the classroom, do mention it to parents or the principal or whoever is the person that you need to mention it to, because that could be a sign, even without obvious issues, that's somebody you want to keep a closer eye on.
For sure. I understand that you don't always treat people with AD with medication. In what cases do you recommend it and what cases not?
The decision to take a medicine or not is complicated, and it's especially complicated and should be thought about in any child, particularly. Um, I try to prescribe medicines when the benefits outweigh the side effects, right? So I am a big believer in coaching or other non-medication strategies. I have the books to prove that's for sure. But sometimes, if you're not making enough progress and if your child is sliding into misery and everyone around them is frustrated, that might be a time to consider medications, at least temporarily. It's not a life sentence, it's something that you try to see if you can turn things around sometimes.
For sure. Is there an age below which you will not recommend medication?
They've started to make these medicines and talk about, yes, you can even give them to a preschooler. I I can count on the fingers of one hand in 20, 30 years here the number of under kindergarten kids that I have prescribed these medicines for. If it's a safety issue that involves kids bolting out, or had one kid who dragged the trampoline to the side of the house and was trying to see if he could get on the roof. There are some safety issues sometimes that merit medications in younger kids, but I would say that the elementary school years are an excellent time to really hammer in the coaching techniques and the organization techniques and the strategies and the planning, to really work on those as much as possible, because the grades really aren't important at those years. Ability to get the work done is the important part. It doesn't really matter whether you have an A+ student in elementary school or a B student, but it really does matter if they have no clue how to do work on their own.
So you mentioned coaching and organizational help. Is there anything else before going on medication that you would try with a child?
There's strategies that are aimed at the child, but there's also strategies that are at the whole family too. So this is something that we do know that ADHD runs in families tremendously. This is a family type of issue. And so I would highly recommend that if you're a parent and you may have ADHD or your partner has ADHD, kind of saying, I may need to look at this for me too, might be really helpful to your child, not just to you.
For sure. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Because I think we're coming up against our time. It's an
You know,
information I haven't.
yeah, I would say I don't want your child to be defined by his or her ADHD. Your child,
They say he is ADHD, right? Doesn't it?
I
And
don't like that.
I know, I don't either.
What we're really trying to say is that more of the time, your child has a harder time keeping their mind on one thing. That's all. Now, that's a big deal, but there's other aspects of your child that are to be celebrated, to be encouraged. And ADHD has a lot of good points along with it, too. You have an increase in creativity, you have children who are bright and sparkling and fun. And I would shy away from saying, you can't do this because of your ADHD. That really gets me up, going up the wall. But here's how this might work best for you. Why don't you try doing it this way and not mentioning anything else? Might work a lot of the times, but I don't want your child to be defined by the ADHD.
I think that's a wonderful way to conclude. And Cynthia, do you have any questions that I haven't asked that you haven't sent me on the chat? Oh, Cynthia.
Gosh, we didn't lose her, did we?
No.
I I have to unmute, but no, I'm happy with the interview. Hope you were, Sarah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Sorry, but somebody rang my doorbell during the.
I didn't hear it. I didn't
Oh,
hear
thank
it.
goodness! I was like, oh my gosh, because then the ring goes, someone is at your door. Heard the doorbell, but
Working at home.
probably a package or something, but
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.